Hey, good evening. You're all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches Chullin Daf Lamed Daled. This whole Gemara is about Tumah V'Tara, and not just some about Tumah V'Tara, but about Tumah V'Tara that was self-induced. What do I mean by that? We're going to be talking about a case of Chullin Shenasu Al Taras Hektish. That really, be'etzem, this the scenarios we're talking about al pi halacha are mutter because it's Chullin. But the person involved treated it like hektish. So there are different levels. Now, the background to this is as follows. We know that chulin can only become tameh to a sheni. It's the least susceptible of tuma. You have an ava tuma, you have a rishon, and you have a sheni. Chulin can't become more tameh than that. The next level of susceptible foods is truma. Truma can have up to a shlishi. And the next susceptible level of tuma, and the most susceptible, is that of hektish, where there can even be a revi. Now, all of that is in real life, but the rules are different when it comes to tuma vitara when we're talking about a case of chulin shenasu al taras hektish, because really be'etzem it's chulin. But Chazal created a set of rules when a kohen or when an individual is makbid on something that's chulin to treat it like hektish. Um, just a fair precursor. This Gemara requires a good 15 hours to unpack. I want to be like fair about it. It requires a tremendous amount of unpacking and knowing the halachos of Tumah V'Tara. But the first distinguishing factor that makes it easier is that we're not talking about inherent Tumah. We're not talking about actual Tumah. We're talking about a self-induced Tumah where I chose to treat this chulin like hektish. Therefore, Chazal built a structure, but be'etzem, midoraisa, whatever that even means, midoraisa, there is no real tuma. We have rules in this kind of alternate universe of Chulin Shanas al Tara sector. So that's a little bit of a background. Today we'll get in here Hashem to the top of Lamed Hamid Aleph, and it is more of a complex Gemara for today, but we will always get through it as we always do. We're starting on the bottom of Lamed Gimel, Lamed Beis, 8-9 lines down. And what we are trying to do here is give our third answer to a question that came up when our Mishnah opened. Our Mishnah from the bottom of Lamed Gimel had an implication that if a shechita was done and there was no blood, so then because there's no blood, someone whose hands were tameh, that were yadayim mesovos or shnios latuma. So because that's true that there was no blood and then yadayim mesovos were allowed to touch the animal, but that implies that if there was blood, it would be problematic. So the Gemara says, I don't understand. If we're talking about chulin, who cares if your hands are tummy? The most your hands can be is a sheni, and chulin anyways maxes out at a sheni, so it shouldn't matter at all. So the Gemara says 8-9 lines from the bottom. Amar Reb Elazar, Amar Reb Hoshaya. Hacha, we're not dealing with regular chulin. And had it been regular chulin, you'd be right. Hacha, what are we dealing with? Chulin shenas tar sekta shaskina. We're talking about a case scenario where a person they were machmir on themselves and they treated their chulin like hektish, and therefore, because they treated it like hektish, there were higher levels of susceptibility of tuma shlishis and possibly even revis. And because that's true, since your hands are shnios, we are concerned, in fact, that if there were to be blood, and now it's mukhshar l'tuma because it has one of the 7 liquids, we're therefore concerned that you could transfer tuma to the next level. However, says the Gemara, much as this answer is a viable answer, it's not true according to everyone. Udulo ki Rabbi Yoshua, because Ditnan, we have a Mishnah from Maseches Shabbos and other places, and this is where we start to see some of the subtlety. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, ha'ochel ochel rishon. If a person eats a food that is tameh with a rishon latuma, then rishon, he becomes a rishon latuma himself. Sheni sheni shlishi shlishi. Whatever level of tuma you consume, you always become that level of tuma. That is the shita of Rebbe Lazar and the name of Rabbi Eliezer, and that aligns with our Mishnah. That aligns with our Mishnah, where we see that it's that it could be that there's a shlishi or a revi. That could be. However, Rabbi Yoshua Omer, he doesn't agree to this at all. Why doesn't Rabbi Yoshua agree? Because Omer, he says, Ha'ochel ochel rishon v'sheni. If I were to eat a food that was either a rishon l'tuma or a sheni l'tuma, so then sheni. With either of those foods consumed, I become a sheni. Please just put on your thinking caps just for a moment. But if I eat a food that's a shlishi, so then says the Gemara, that shlishi makes me a sheni for hektish purposes, and the ein sheni letruma. However, it doesn't make me a sheni for truma purposes. Now, if it doesn't make me a sheni for truma purposes, he won't fit with our Mishnah, because our Mishnah spoke about yadayim mesoavos, which are shnios, and if you can't have more than shnios, then Rabbi Yeshua won't work for our Mishnah. Now let's get a level deeper in the sheet of Rabbi Yeshua. What is the case that Rabbi Yeshua is talking about? We're 3 lines from the bottom on Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. The Gemara says, "Bechulin shenasu al taras truma." That's when we are talking about someone who treats chulin with the tuma level of truma. How many levels of tuma can there be for truma? Up to shlishi. However, it's only al taharas truma in, but al taharas hektish lo. And our answer was in our Mishnah, the third answer that we just saw 5-6 lines ago, was that we were talking about chulin shenasu al taharas hektish. But kasavar, what does Rabbi Yoshua hold? He holds that that's not what's going on. He holds chulin shenasu al taharas hektish les behu shlishi. He says that when it comes to chulin that was done al taras hektish, that there is no shlishi, and therefore, because Rabbi Yoshua holds that there is no shlishi, therefore it can't be an answer, because we're back to where we started with yadayim mesoavos arasheni, and if you did chulin shenasu al taras hektish, there is no shlishi, which means it's a sheni, which means that there is no reason why the diuk from the open of our Gemara yesterday and the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph should be correct. We should have said that it's totally let's just look at the diuk again, right? We had said that if there is going to be blood, that we would not be allowed to use yadayim mesoavos. That's not true according to Rabbi Yoshua. Therefore, we do have an answer for our Mishnah that we're talking about chulin that are nasos al yedei hektish, chulin nasu al taras hektish, but not according to Rabbi Yoshua, only according to Rabbi Eliezer. So says the Gemara, I'm not sure I understand why you're limiting Rabbi Yoshua to that explanation. Vilukma, maybe we should establish Rabbi Yoshua as follows. Maybe we should say that, what?
Well, I mean, instead of going to, Rabbi said, let Rabbi interpret the Mishnah as this dealing.
Rabbi Elazar. Yeah, but it's talking about the Shita of Rabbi Yehoshua in the Brisa, in the Mishnah. Vilukma, when we're trying to understand Rabbi Yehoshua's Shita, it should be Bechulin Shenasu al Taras Truma Rabbi Yehoshua. We just defined Rabbi Yehoshua by saying that it's only true in that he only allows his understanding to be in a case of Chulin Nasu al Taras Truma, not al Taras Hektish. But why do we have to say that? Maybe we should say that it's Chulin Shenasu al Taras Truma, and it's Rabbi Yoshua, and then we would have perhaps a case of Shlishi. Says the Gemara, you can't say that within Rabbi Yoshua. Why not? Lo sal kadaitach, top of Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, 2 lines down. Why can't it be that we're talking about Truma? Because, says the Gemara, Diktani Basar, we have a discussion about Basar in these Mari Mekomos, and because that's true, Basar can't be in this category. But the Truma Basar Mi'ika, do we have meat in the Truma category? No, we only have vegetation, vegetables, fruits in that category. So therefore, because we are talking about a case of Basar, therefore, it can't be that we're talking about Truma. Says the Gemara, Lamai Bekachim, if you wanted to say that it's not talking about Truma and that it is talking about Kachim, but our Mishnah on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph says Chaya Bekachim Mi'ika. If you look back on Lamed Gimel Amud Aleph, this was a standout feature. Hashochet behema chaya ve'ov. So says the Gemara, it's fine. I understand what you're saying, that perhaps Rabbi Yoshua can't be talking about a case of Truma, but it's also shver to say that our Mishnah is talking about Kodshim. Says the Gemara, Basar be-basar michlaf. When it comes to 2 kinds of meats, I could treat them both the same way. The meat of the chaya and the meat of the regular animal can both be treated al taras hakodesh. That's fine. Basar beperi lo michla. But those two things are not going to be, those are so far apart that the way I would choose to treat meat is not the same way I would choose to treat, is not the same way I would choose to treat the fruits. So therefore, it must be that our Mishnah is not talking about truma, and it is talking about hektish. So therefore, our answer stands that our Mishnah can only be like the Tanakama, like Rabbi Eliezer, and not like Rabbi Yoshua. So says the Gemara, not everyone agrees to this. Omar Ula. Ula says, Chevraya Amrin. There were people who said, we'll see who he is in a moment, that Bechulin Shanas al Taras Hektish Udelo Rabbi Yoshua. Ula says there are people who said that. That was like we saw earlier. That was like our Mishnah, like the answer of Reb Elazar, who said that our Mishnah is talking about Rabbi Eliezer, not to be confused because it's already confusing enough. But if you look at where we started today, Rabbi Elazar was the Amora who brought the machlokas of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua. So Rabbi Elazar held that our Mishnah was talking about Chullin Shanasos as hektish, and he said it has to only be like Rabbi Eliezer. So the Chevraya agreed with that. Ve'ana, but Ula himself disagrees. Ve'ana amina that our Mishnah on Lamed Gimel Lamed Aleph could even be Rabbi Yehoshua. Even, how could that be? Ve'lo mibaya ka'amar. It was not a regular limud, it was a lo mibaya. Lo mibaya, I don't need you to tell me that chulin shenasu al taras kodesh techemri dispu shlishi. I know for sure that when it comes to hektish that there's a shlishi, because hektish is the most susceptible form of food. Ela afilu chulin shenasu al taras truma nami ispu shlishi. He disagrees with the Mishnah that we saw on the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, and he holds that there's another Tanaic source to support him. And he holds that we could even have a case where our Mishnah is like Rabbi Yoshua, and the limud style is a lo mibaya. Not only by hektish do we have a shlishi, but by truma we also have a shlishi. And therefore our Mishnah could even be Rabbi Yoshua, so no proof. Says the Gemara, man chevraya. When Ula quoted the chevraya, who was he talking about? He was talking about Rabbi Bar Chana. To Amar Rabbi Bar Chana, Amar Rav Yochanan. My ahadre Rabbi Eliezer Rabbi Yehoshua lehadade. Says the Gemara, what was the dialogue, the subtext of the machlokes from the Mishnah that we saw in the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, this machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua? Says the Gemara, Amar lo Rabbi Eliezer lo Rabbi Yehoshua. Matzinu, we know that ochel is chamor min ha'ochel, that food is more stringent than the person who eats the food, that the food is more sensitive. How do we know this? De'ilu nevelas of tahor, that when it comes to a nevelas of tahor, bachutz lo metame. A nevelas of tahor does not make anything tame when you touch it. When does it make something tame, the nevelas of tahor? That is ve'ilu ochla metame begadim abesabli, as we've seen many times. That a nevelas of tahor has a very unique form of tuma, which is not to the touch. It's not metame b'maga ub'masa. It's metame abesabli, that when you swallow food of that nevelas of tahor, so then it makes you tame. So what do we see? We see that the ochel is more chamor than the food is more chamor than the person who eats the food. So says the Gemara, but ve'ilu ochla, ve'anu heich lo nase ochel kamachal. We have to at least make the ochel into the machal. They have to at least have the same status. And looking back at the Mishnah on the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, that's why Rabbi Eliezer holds that Rishon, if you eat a Rishon, it makes you a Rishon. If you eat a Sheni, it makes you a Sheni. If you eat a Shlishi, it makes you a Shlishi. Because the food is more chamor than the person. So you can't reach another higher level of tumah. The food's more chamor than you. So if the food's more chamor than you, that it's not gonna turn you into one above. It's gonna keep you the same exact way. What would Rabbi Yoshua say to that? Rabbi Yoshua, it can't be that a Rishon makes you a Rishon and a Sheni makes you a Sheni. Why not? Because min nevelas of tahor lo gamrinan. We can't learn anything from the case of nevelas of tahor. Why not? Because the chidushu. That case is a total chiddush in halacha. And the Gemara doesn't say this line, but we don't learn things from a chiddush. A chiddush, they're anomalous cases, they're standout one-off cases. And because that's true, you cannot learn from there. So the root of the machlokas in our Mishnah at the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, the Mishnah of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua, is that according to Rabbi Eliezer, because we learn from Nevelas Of that the food itself is more powerful than the person itself, so therefore when you eat a Rishon, you become a Rishon. When you eat a Sheni, you become a Sheni. But according to Rabbi Yoshua, you're not allowed to do that because the nevelas oftar is a chiddush. Ella, what does Rabbi Yoshua hold? We're 2/3 of the way down on Lamed Daled Amud Aleph. Ela matzinu shehamachal chamor mina ochel. Since we can't learn from nevelas oftar, we are actually able to flip the script that the maichal, that the food that you are eating is chamor min ha'ochel, is more chamor than the ochel. Why? Dilu maichal b'kebetza. For a food to become tamei, that has to be at least a volume of a kibetza. Cannot transmit tuma less than a kibetza. But ve'ochel, when does the eater become tamei? Tamei. That's ad achel kechatzi pras. That's double a betza. That's a lot. It's 4 times a kazayis. That's quite a bit. It's 4 slices of bread. Ve'anu. Therefore, says Rabbi Yoshua, hech nase ochel kamachal. It can't be that a rishon becomes a rishon and a sheni becomes a sheni. It has to kick you up a level. We're going to discuss this more in a minute. Rabbi Eliezer, how would he respond? He says the similar type of argument that Rabbi Yoshua said to him. Rabbi Eliezer says to Rabbi Yoshua, Tuma mishiurim lo gamrinan. We are not allowed to learn halachos of Tuma from the world of shiurin. And ve'od, says Rabbi Eliezer, pushing on Rabbi Yoshua, lidvarecha, even according to you who says that we are able to learn Tuma from shiurin, sha'ata omer al rishon sheni. When you say that a person who ate a rishon becomes a sheni, there I agree with you. I can get that. Yafe ata omer. But sheni lama. I don't understand the next part of your shita where you say that that he's a sheni. So Amar lo, what does Rabbi Yoshua say? Matzinu sheni ose sheni de mashkin. We do have a case scenario when a liquid is involved, when the liquid is mukhshar, that the tuma will transfer in an equivalent way. That if you consume a sheni, that's a liquid, you are a sheni. So Amar lo, Rabbi Eliezer says back, no. A liquid is always a rishon, says the Gemara. Amar lo v'hamashkin nami tchila havu. Where do we know that a mashkin is a tchila, which is code word for rishon? Ditnan. We have a Mishnah from Maseches Para. Kol haposel betruma. Anyone who where there's a psul by truma, which is a reference to a sheni latuma, that's metame mashkin lios chila. So we're going in a lighter direction. You're going from strict to more lenient. You can't say, Rabbi Yoshua, that a sheni becomes a sheni when you're dealing with mashkin. A sheni becomes a rishon, and we have a mishnah to prove it. There are exceptions, chutz mitzvul yom, which we're not going to discuss. The Odin, furthermore, Rabbi Eliezer continues pounding the pavement against Rabbi Yoshua. Shlishi sheni lama. I don't understand. You said, and we can look back at the mishnah at the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis, that we had said that shlishi, that if a person were to have consumed a shlishi, that only makes the person a sheni lekodesh, and ve'ein sheni letruma. So it says the Gemara, Lama, why did you learn that way? Why did you say that if you eat a shlishi, that it only makes you a sheni lehekdesh? So Amar lo, afani lo amarti ela betruma. That was only true when it comes to truma. If you ate a shlishi, that's a truma. Why? Shetarasa tuma hi eitzel hekdesh. This line requires quite a bit of commentary, but basically what it means that because the levels of susceptibility of truma and hektish are different, so a shlishi in one is a sheni of the other, because hektish is much more sensitive than truma. So therefore, the shlishi of truma is a sheni of hektish. Okay, so all of that is a very long-winded version. What?
Truma or hektish is more chumrah?
Hektish is more chama. Hektish is more chama. Good. So says the Gemara on the top of Lamed Daled Amud Beis. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Reb Asi, Amar Reb Yochanan, Amar Reb Yanai. Ha'ochel shlishi shel chulin shenasu al taras hektish. If a person ate a shlishi of chulin, so that's shlishi letuma, it's a third level, but it's chulin shenasu al taras hektish. It's really chulin, but he's treating it like holy food. Nase gufo sheni lekodesh. His body becomes a sheni. So this is like the sheet of Ula that we saw on the earlier page. But the Gemara says, wait 1 second, Esve, we have a question, Reb Zera le Ravasi. Reb Zera says to Ravasi was the author of this line that we just learned, that if you eat a shlishi of chulin shenasu al taras hektish, that your body becomes a sheni. He says, I don't understand. Shlishi sheni lekodesh. If you eat a food that's a 3, that's shlishi letuma, your body becomes a sheni. But ve'ein sheni letruma. Bechulin shenasu al taras truma in, al taras hektish lo. that your body doesn't become a sheni after eating a shlishi when it comes to al taras hektish. But the case of Rav Asi, as you can see on the third line of this page, is chulin shenasu al taras hektish. So this brisa is a kashya on the sheet of Rav Asi. So Amar Le, Rav Asi would have said back to Reb Zera, Lomi boya Amar. Not only is it true by Taras HaKodesh, it's even true by Al Taras Hekdesh, like we saw on the previous page as well. Says the Gemara, you can't say that over here because, after all, Afani lo amarti elavitruma ka'amar. The language was it's only by truma, not by hekdesh. Says the Gemara, okay, I have to backtrack, and you're right. It's really amura'i ninhu ve'aliba de Rabbi Yochanan. If you look at this, the first line of this page, look at who it's quoting. Amar Reb Zera, Amar Reb Asi, Amar Reb Yochanan. And the Gemara says that really there are two Amoraim according to Reb Yochanan, and we're not sure whether or not we could say that if it's Chulin Shanas al Taras Hektish, whether or not a Shlishi in that space would make you a Sheni Latuma. One more little sugya for the night, and then we'll stop at the top of the first line on Lamed Hey Amid Aleph. Amar Ula, we're just about halfway down on Lamed Daled Amid Beis. Ha'ochel shlishi shel chulin shenasu al taras truma. Let's say I treat my food like truma, and I ate a shlishi of that chulin food that I'm treating like truma. Nifsal gufo milechal betruma. Then you basically become a shlishi, and you're not allowed to eat truma anymore. So again, the case is you ate a shlishi, you become a shlishi. Says the Gemara, my kamashmalon. Tanina, we already learned this. Shlishi is a sheni lehektish, ve'ein sheni letruma. So when we say ve'ein sheni letruma, that means that you become a shlishi. So that's the same exact thing. So why did Ula feel the need to say that if I eat a shlishi of chulin shenasu al taras truma, that I become a shlishi? We already know that. V'chulin shenasu al taras truma, sheni hu delo have, ha shlishi have, you become a shlishi. So Reb Zera's line, Ula's line, is extra. So says the Gemara, it's not true. Imehahi, if all I had was our Mishnah, which was what we just quoted, which is that a shlishi is a sheni lahektish. If all we had was a sheet of Rabbi Yoshua, again referencing the Mishnah from Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis at the bottom, Havamina, lo sheni have velo shlishi have, that had the shlishi had no impact on you at all, and you're nothing. It didn't impact you at all. The aidi do amar sheni bekodesh amar nami ein sheni betruma. We were looking for something poetic and symmetrical in our Mishnah. So because we had to say that if you ate a shlishi, it would have made you a sheni behektish, we also wanted to just make it easy to remember. So we said ein sheni betruma. And I might have thought that without the comment of Reb Zera that perhaps eating a shlishi when it's chulin shenasu al taras truma, that it has no impact on you, kamash malan, that it does. That's why we needed the line of Reb Zera. Says the Gemara, 5-6 lines from the bottom. Esvei Rav Hamnuna le'ula. Rav Hamnuna asks a question on Ula. Let's remember what Ula said, that if you eat a shlishi, which is made chulin al taras truma, then you become tameh. Says the Gemara, wait 1 second. We have a Mishnah from Maseches Taras. Harishon shebechulin tameh umetame. If I have a rishon in chulin and it gets connected to another food, I mess up. So then the rishon is tameh, and it's metame the next layer too. V'hasheni, says the Gemara, if I have a sheni, so the sheni is posel, it does ruin the sheni, but ve'eno metame, it can't create more tuma. The power of the tuma is watered down now. V'hashlishi ne'echal b'nezid hadema. The third level of tuma is already edible. That's totally fine because we're talking about chulin over here. Now, v'i amris nifsal gufo milechol b'truma. If Ula's right that if you eat a shlishi shel chulin shenasu al taras truma, that your whole body is going to be tameh, then I don't understand this case where we just said that you're allowed to eat the food ne'echal b'nezid hadema. Ne'echal b'nezid hadema basically means and lechem unezid adoshin, the story by in Breishis. So the Gemara says you're eating some kind of stew. The Gemara says that why should you be allowed to do that? If Ula's right that you're nifsal gufo milechol truma, then why would you be allowed to eat the nezid hadema? Then if that were to be true, v'yamris nifsal begufo milechol betruma, then safinan le midi de pasi le legufe. Then you're eating something that's usher. Says the Gemara, Amar le hanach le-nezid hadema. Don't ask any questions from the case of nezid hadema. Why? Because the Gemara points out that it's impossible to consume enough food to become tameh. Fascinating concern. The leka kizayis b'chdei achilas pras. There's no way to eat that amount of food in that amount of time. The poskim actually discuss this in regards to eating foods that are extremely hot. It's kimat impossible to get to the point where you will end up having a where you'll end up having the shiur of achila. It's true for a bracha achron. It's also true for isurim. This is exactly the reason why on Yom Kippur, when chas v'shalom, a person is sick enough that they need to eat, we eat a lesser amount beyond b'chdei achilas pras, whatever the shiur of time is. Okay, so this is obviously a very, very complex Gemara. If you, it requires, again, as I mentioned, it requires a lot of unpacking. Just to do a quick overview, and then we'll stop right here. The quick overview is that we were trying to answer up our Mishnah, because our Mishnah from Lamed Beis, Lamed Gimel, Lamed Aleph, I should say, left over a diuk that when there's no blood, then a yadayim mesoavos, that's a sheni latuma. That is not allowed. That has no tuma, that's fine. But if there was blood, it would be tummy. So the third answer that we learned today is that we were talking about Chullin, Shanas el Taras Hektish. And that was according only to Rabbi Eliezer, according to most Shitas, though there was other Shitas. And basically everything else is trying to unpack those Shitas. And then on the Amud Beis, we drilled down onto to the statement of Ravasi, which we ended up saying there's a machlokas amoraim about it, and the statement of Ula, where we said, don't worry, we're talking about Nazir Hadema, and there's no way to eat that food within Kedei Achilas Pras to even violate the Isser, so therefore it's fine. But in general, it could be that there's still Tuma. We'll stop right here. Tomorrow, Mir Hashem will pick up at the top of Lamed Hey Amud Aleph with Amar of Yonasan, wishing you all a beautiful night.